We're the only stakeholders. Who says that we have to maximize a certain kind of shareholder value? Sure, we could try to maximize money, but we could just choose to make time our shareholder value. How can we make business decisions? How can we think strategically about actually making time versus money?
Welcome back to the Time Freedom Podcast, where you can learn how to rethink your work and your money to create a life you love right now. Join us for insights to help you find meaningful freedom so you can choose how and when and with whom you work for as long as you want. Here are your hosts, me, Brian Harriott, and Kirby Dennison. Today on the podcast, we welcome Lee LeFever. Lee is the co-founder of Common Craft, the company behind some of the internet's earliest and most recognizable explainer videos. His In Plain English video series helped millions of people understand emerging technologies like RSS, Twitter, and wikis, and landed Common Craft a partnership with Google. Lee is the author of The Art of Explanation and Big Enough, a book about designing a business around your life instead of the other way around. He and his wife, Sachi, have lived on Orcas Island in Washington since 2017. Welcome, everybody, back to the Time Freedom Podcast. We're here. We're lucky to have with us today Lee LeFever. Welcome, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
So I am particularly excited to welcome Lee to the podcast because not on purpose, but I guess by chance, we are both published through the same publisher, Page Two, which is pretty cool. Lee's book is one of Lee's books is Big Enough. And I'm excited about that. And then also that particular book had a ton of influence on me and some of the way I think about things from the Monitorium, which we'll talk about, or what I call a catalyst and how they're translated into different things that kind of originated, some of them, maybe not fully, but with you, which is really great. So I thought we'd have a conversation about the topics and see if we can give our listeners some insights.
Let's do it.
So before we start, we like to ask kind of a more non-traditional question just to get the juices flowing. But it's what is one thing that few people know about you?
Yeah. Well, I've lived on the West Coast for most of my life, but I grew up in a small town in North Carolina. And I was raised on a fish hatchery, and that my father started, and my nephew now runs, that does koi and goldfish. And it was one of the first companies that developed the sort of goldfish and koi market in the U.S. And I grew up on the hatchery itself.
Oh, that's really cool. And then you ended up completely on the other side of the country, which maybe we can get into that in a little bit. But
yeah, that's right.
So we like to answer this question as well. And Kirby, would you like to go? Kirby's got a touch of a cold here today. So if you want to keep your answer short, that's okay.
Yes, forgive me. I will blame my 3 children. So I will piggyback off of Lee's actually, and I worked at a fish hatchery. I did a program. It was called Range Riders when I was 15. You had to be 16 to get a scholarship, but I still worked all summer with them to earn money. And we stayed a week at one of our state fish hatcheries here in Colorado. And we actually swam in the ponds, the fish ponds.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then one of the biggest projects we did was they were restoring one of the ponds that they hadn't used for years. And so we removed acres of trees out of this pond. So.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. That's really cool.
The thought of, my familiarity with fish hatcheries comes from a place near Sacramento or Davis where I saw, because our friend works for it's like the DNR, the Department of Fish Game or something like that.
Fish and Wildlife. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thought of swimming with all those tiny little things, I'm definitely winging this one, but for the last 2 days, I've hardly been able to walk because I have this new trainer this year that I'm investing in, and she puts me through the ringer. But the thing that actually I didn't really know is I have some issues with my back, and she always asks me, is it like 50% and worse or 50% kind of not as bad? And she's like, if it's anywhere 50% or less, we're just going to work right through that pain to recover it. And I did not trust her until we did it and it
Yeah.
worked. And so I didn't realize that was something that people did. I just thought like when you're in injury, you just kind of don't do anything with it.
Yeah, that's been my experience. Is they're like, if it hurts, we should not do it. But I guess maybe that's
Yeah.
changing.
Well, and I think it's as people get older that then she said it's a negative cycle because then you
Mhm.
just stop doing it and stop doing it and stop doing it. And then you just don't
Yeah,
have
that
the
makes
mobility.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, let's get into the good stuff.
All right.
Before we start, Lee, can you just give us some baseline personal and professional headlines or demographics, I guess, just so that the listeners can kind of place who you are and where you are and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. So my name is Lee LeFever, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Common Craft and author of The Art of Explanation and Big Enough. I live with my wife, Sachi, on Orcas Island, which is off the coast of Washington State between Seattle and Vancouver. We've been here since 2017 after living in Seattle for about 20 years. And I've worked from home since 2003 and have always been interested in being a small business entrepreneur, I guess, or a solopreneur in some ways, which I'm sure we'll get to later. Have a Bernedoodle named Piper that's our
Love
constant
it.
companion, who's right here beside me right now.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's it. That's me.
When you said that, one of our last interviews, halfway through, I just heard this snoring and we realized it was the guest's dog. So we're going to be on the listen for that.
Oh
No,
yeah,
I'm
that's
kidding.
great. She had a big walk, so she'll probably be okay.
That's awesome. Can you tell me? So I know it's true of me, and I feel like a lot of people dream about moving to an island and living there. And I also know, having had a place on a lake, that eventually it kind of just becomes normal. But I was just wondering if you think back to when you were first deciding to go there and move there, and what's the experience like? Yeah.
Yeah. So Orcas Island is about an hour ferry ride from the mainland, and it's about a 45-minute drive from Seattle to get to the ferry dock. So it's a little bit of a trip.
Uh-huh.
And when we were in Seattle for a long time, we took a lot of advantage of city stuff. Like we had season tickets to the Seattle Sounders MLS team and things like that. But as we sort of got older, we started using the city less. It was just kind of like we weren't doing the things in the city that we used to. And we kind of thought are we ready for a change? Could there be something different? And at the same time, the island was getting fiber optic internet and very easy Amazon deliveries and all the things that you kind of depend on. So logistically, it became much more attractive, but also just for our lifestyle. I think that after being in the city for so long, we were different. We were ready for just something totally different. And we knew that Orcas was a really special place for us. We had been there many times. And it kind of, I could tell a story about doing it, but we first looked at property in 2017, and within a year or so, we had bought some property, and that's where it started.
How many people are on the island?
Around 4,000 or so. It's 55 square miles. It's about twice as big as Manhattan by square miles, which is kind of interesting. It's mountainous, but it has valleys with farms and things like that. And there's really interesting people end up here. We have our share of a few billionaires that live here, but also lots of artists and lots of farmers and just all kinds of people.
And it's right off of Vancouver Island, which is where they film Alone, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's on the northern part of it. I can actually see Vancouver
Okay.
Island right now from my from my office.
That's cool. One of the things that I really we're trying to do with this podcast is give people other role models for people who kind of live life differently. Because I had been trapped in traditional work for so long, and I kind of broke free, and there aren't a lot of role models. So can you tell us just a little bit about how you chose to live differently? I guess what differently means to you. Hopefully differently means better.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that one of the things that was formative for me really early on was the book, The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim. I'm going to forget his name now.
Ferriss.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss. Yeah. So that kind of put me onto this track of there's automation, there's ways of thinking about this. But really the motor behind a lot of that is finding a way to have passive income, which was a way that, we started structuring Common Craft after a while. But I think that I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. I mentioned my dad started this fish hatchery. Nobody in my family has really ever had a boss other than themselves. So I always wanted to do that kind of thing. But I always felt like when I ended up in some kind of corporate situation where there's a lot of sort of ladder climbing and sort of the competitiveness around keeping up with the Joneses and that sort of thing, that it just never really landed with me. It was not something that felt like it was satisfying. I could imagine myself kind of moving into that at some point. some point or just like appreciating that. But I've always deep down inside really felt like I was destined to be more independent and more sort of entrepreneurial in my own style and not pay attention so much to what everybody else is doing. And that's part of what I tried to relate in Big Enough was that it seems like that there is a default. Like if you're an entrepreneur, then you have to work 80 hours a week. You have to have employees. You have to have a board. You have to have all these things. Otherwise, you're not doing it right. And I just kind of got to where thinking, especially after we started experimenting, I was like, no, there's actually lots of ways to do this. And there's a lot of satisfaction and happiness that come from it that may not be monetary, but it's to your name of your book. Like it's about time and freedom. It's about what if the success that we're taught in school is only one version and that there's other versions that include not having an alarm clock, things like that.
Yeah, and I had a very similar experience. Like, I live in the Bay Area, so you've got all the tech firms. And many years ago, I listened to a podcast called Startup. This is like when I was first getting into podcasts, and they kind of took you through the process of, starting a company and VCing it and all that sort of stuff. And they featured this one company that ultimately didn't make it as a unicorn or whatever. And then they kind of said, well, I guess it's just a lifestyle business. And so that it lived on for a long time, working for the person, working around the lifestyle that the founder created. And I'm like, wait a second, that's not a bad thing. It's a really, really great thing.
Yeah. It just doesn't make headlines. It's great for the person, but not great for the journalists or the other people to write about.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Common Craft is and how that came to be? I think people will find that kind of interesting. I certainly did.
Yeah, sure. So I was interested in online communities. I was an online community manager from, like around the year 2000, from like 1999 up for a company that was a software company for healthcare organizations. And I just got really into the idea that the internet is a communication medium and it's going to be a way for us to communicate with each other. Around 2004, 2005, social media started to come onto the scene, and there were all these new technologies like RSS and wikis and social networking and blogging. And I was like, oh, this is it. These are the tools that are actually going to help us do this like online communication thing. And what I realized was that the people doing the explaining about these things were often technical people. They were the people that built the tools, and they communicated from an engineering perspective versus a human perspective of why should I care about this? So I started writing blog posts that explained, this is what RSS is, this is what a wiki is. And I just loved it. I felt so at home doing that. And once YouTube started to be a thing, I started trying to do the thing where you're a guy writing on the whiteboard and looking at the camera at the same time, explaining something. And that was a big mistake. I wasted some time doing that. And my wife, Sachi, had this idea of doing videos, but doing a different format where you point the camera down onto a whiteboard and then use pieces of paper and markers and hands to sort of tell a story over a voiceover. And that was what started Common Craft videos in 2007. And our first video was RSS in plain English. And at that moment, things just changed in our entire lives, where suddenly, despite having no experience in video production or education, we were known as explainers. And within 6 months, we were working with Google, and it just went really quickly from there. We're lucky to strike a chord, and people saw it as something that was needed at the time. So long story short, we continued to be hired by companies, but we also started to license our own videos for use in education. Over time, we morphed more we did fewer custom projects and built our library bigger because licensing was a model that worked for us. It was what I call a long bet versus a short bet, but it was a long bet that takes years to do. But if you can do it, then you get residual income from it. And that was our key to sort of finding that happiness, where we could have sort of a motor running behind Common Craft that was producing enough income for us to live and to continue to work. And it kind of separated time and money. Like that was the big idea, which I'm sure that's something that you're well aware of. A couple more things. I've taught explanation skills. I've run the Explainer Academy, and I do a lot of stuff around that, and wrote the book, The Art of Explanation, too, in 2012.
I think, it's one thing. So I've got your book here, so I could show people, for the couple people we have watching on YouTube. What I remember was this kind of continual adjustment of the business model to figure out how could it be more passive? How can I separate the money from the time? And because you were the sole owners of your enterprise, you could choose to do it however you wanted to, even if it was a longer bet, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think one of the things I write about that I still believe is that, you're kind of taught that the goal of business, the reason to have a business is to increase shareholder value, right? Like that's what it's for. It's very true with public companies. Like that, has to be a part of your decision making. But if you're a small business, for us, a husband and wife team, we thought, we're the only shareholders, we're the only stakeholders. Who says that we have to like maximize a certain kind of shareholder value? Like, sure, we could try to maximize money, but we could just choose to make time our shareholder value. How can we make business decisions? How can we think strategically about actually making time versus money? You need both, of course. You've got to be able to make some money. But that was kind of a philosophical idea behind what we were doing, was that we were in control. Nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody cared probably. So we just took that opportunity.
And I guess you could say you're still building shareholder value. It's just that you're the shareholders. And
yeah, that's right.
You get to define the value
that's
as
right.
well.
That's right. Yeah.
That's cool. So I want to go on into the kind of the community membership thing a bit. I do recall a part of the book was written about that. I feel like, communities and memberships have kind of ebbed and flowed and they've looked different. I don't know, like if you're still involved kind of in that space, but how you think about that now, and also how somebody that maybe wants to live this life where they're kind of separating time from money, that does seem to be a model that could still work. I don't know if you thought about that recently or how that might look for somebody now, if you have any thoughts on that.
And are you referring to Common Crafts membership service or my sort of past?
I think I'm remembering to how you did it at Common Craft.
Yeah. So when we started licensing our videos, we started off doing a la carte, where you could just go to the video page. If you want to download that video, you pay a few bucks and you download the video, and then you're off. But once our library grew, people said, "Hey, is there a way I can just access everything all the time?" And we're like, "Oh yeah, we can." That's actually a really good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, most of what we've done has come from people asking. So in 2012, we moved over to purely a membership model where you pay an annual fee. That's a recurring annual fee, and you get access to everything we do. And we had a couple of different tiers and everything. And I always want things to work better, but it worked for a while, and it continues to actually work. Even today, we have members who continue to be members, even though we're not doing that on our website anymore. We still support them in that way. But I think it's a really valuable model. And at the time, I think it did well because it was fairly early in that. That was 2012. But I think over time, people have become sort of membershiped out, that you pay subscriptions for a lot of things. And there gets to be a point where like, how many can one person do? But I think for the lesson that we learned was to focus on some organizations. So we have a lot of members who are school districts or universities or community colleges. And for those end up, a lot of times the sort of annual fee just becomes a line item on a budget, and they renew year after year, which we're very thankful for. But that was a great way to sort of have somewhat guaranteed income by working with bigger organizations than a lot of smaller people. Not smaller people, that's not the right way to say that, but a lot of individuals versus big organizations.
Right. Interesting. I want to switch topics a little bit to how you've organized kind of your whole professional career around this concept of explaining, which would you have thought that graduating college that would be the way that your life went, right? You're like, nobody does, right?
No, yeah.
But I write about in my book the idea of this catalyst. So there's a lot of books about this concept of enough. Like, when do you achieve enough and feel happy? And I think that's all good. But I still feel like you can still have big goals. And I remember a part in your book specifically which says, just because you're organizing your business around your lifestyle doesn't mean you can't still have ambition. And that one hit me really hard. I'm like, okay, yes, that's exactly what I think. And I almost believe that because if you can organize your business where you've got a couple of months that you can pull back and take, get out of the day-to-day, you have the brain space to be able to make creative connections and find that thing that might actually like launch your business even bigger than if we're just stuck in it all day. So all that to pick up with this concept of a catalyst where you've got to find that one thing that really transforms your business. I've settled on you either got to have this incredibly unique skill, like my son sold our car at 7 years old. Like he's an incredible salesman, right? Or a uniquely incredible relationship. Like, the head of the Wall Street Journal and they're going to just put you in the paper. Or an exponentially valuable idea that you kind of make synonymous with yourself, which I'm trying to do with time freedom. You've done with the concept of explanation. All that to say, like, because you've tested this model before I even told you about it. Like, do you feel like there's something there? I always am just interested in people's opinions on that, and anything else that you can tell me about basing a business off an idea, because I'm going to be doing it.
Yeah, totally.
You're doing it.
I think that one of the things that I think about that might be helpful for people is, if you take away technology, let's just go back 100 years and there's no internet, there's none of the things we use today. Like, what would you be doing? Well, like, what is the thing about you or the skill that you have or even the connections you have that would make you successful in that time frame without all the internet and stuff? And so I think for me, I could imagine being like a journalist or something. Like, there's something about me deep down where I want to share what I've learned and to do it in a way that inspires other people, that helps them learn something maybe they didn't see before. And that's really what I love is trying to find ways to help change people's perspective. Like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Like, I don't know where I got it, but I discovered it doing common craft videos. That's what I want to do. And that's why I've written a couple of books. That's why I'm doing a Substack now. That's why I'm doing a lot. That I just had this internal drive to share what I'm learning. And it gives me great satisfaction to do that. So that's where a lot of that came from, was sort of just having something in my brain that needs to do that. And thankfully, using the tools we have today, I could do that at a scale that helped get me some awareness for what I was doing.
That question, I was just thinking what mine would be. I don't know, Kirby, I don't want to put you on the spot for what yours would be, but I think mine would be, I would probably be a teacher.
Yeah.
I think, like, without all the internet and all that stuff. I just love to not spout out knowledge, but I just love to bring people along. If I look back at the traditional jobs I've had, the best parts are when you've got someone new coming in and you want to get them up to speed on some things. But yeah, that's definitely cool. What's yours, Kirby? Do you have an idea?
Well, I've always said I didn't want to be a teacher. And also I feel like as a coach, that's kind of what you are. So it probably would be that. I do like getting people up to speed, like helping them learn a new skill, helping them. Could not be like high school or junior high teacher, probably not even elementary. And
I always thought I would want to be a college teacher, professor, because then you don't have to deal with just keeping the class in line.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I probably would just blend in. We had breakfast for FFA week this week with my daughters, and I was sitting with like a bunch of first graders, and literally like adults walked past me because I apparently maybe blended in. I don't know.
Funny.
Well, like, you're at the kids' table, we'll just leave you.
Yeah. Just to add on to that a little bit, I feel like there's always a risk in doing something that's new to people. Like, nobody had ever heard of anybody who was a professional explainer. And there's always a risk there. And there's sort of conventional wisdom in the business world that if it doesn't exist by now, then there's probably not a market for it. And I think the internet changed that. I had this idea that, like, the internet is really big. Like, it's way bigger than anybody realizes. And there's enough niches and enough people with enough needs and things that are being realized that I think there's huge opportunities in small niches. And that's really kind of the model for doing things like we're doing.
It really is. And I always think when someone says something like that, it's that 1,000 true fans concept. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Kevin Kelly's kind of thing.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's really all you need.
That essay was one of the things that really engaged me early on as well.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite video? I'm curious. Or is it like your children? Although I met with someone who did actually tell me who their favorite child was.
Really? Funny.
I'm not going to say who it was or who that person is.
Yeah. Gosh, a favorite. So Common Craft video wise, some of the early ones kind of I laugh at because they're creative in a way that we stopped doing after a while. But the Wikis video, the second one we did, has lots of like snapping and things like we would like blow on the whiteboard to have things blow off the whiteboard. And like those early videos, we would like use strings to pull like something across the screen on the whiteboard. And some of those are really fun.
I watched that. Yes, I went
Yeah.
and watched it.
But yeah, there's so many, yeah.
For
I
different
like
reasons.
the Twitter one. I think was really interesting. The story with that was I was really into Twitter, and I was like, this needs a better explanation. I work from this perspective, like, where is an explanation problem? And to me, an explanation problem is when the reach of something is limited by how it's being communicated. And Twitter was that. Like, I was early on Twitter, and I felt like this is going to be big. People are going to really be confused by this. So we'll make a video. And without even contacting Twitter, we made the video. And then I sent it. I found Biz Stone's email address. He was one of the co-founders, and sent him the link. And within a couple of weeks, we had a handshake deal where they put the video on the front page of twitter.com, where it stayed for over a year. And it said, thanks to our friends at Common Craft, and linked to our website. And that was hugely productive for us. That really sent so much traffic to us from that, and really put us on the map.
That's that exponentially valuable relationship that you were able to create.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of the lesson too there was like, I didn't even know we were going to talk to them when we started making the video. I just felt the video needed to exist, and took our own time to make it. And then sort of on a lark reached out, and that all happened. And that's one of the things I tell people a lot about is like, if you see a company that's struggling with explanation and you feel like you're a good explainer, make something for them and send it to them and see what happens. And maybe you'll waste your time, but there's some chance that it'll engage you and you could have a whole relationship.
One of the features, I guess, of your book is that as you read it, I guess both of your books, is that you referred to this video on YouTube, and then you can go look it up. So it's almost like interactive in a way. And I found myself doing that a lot. Yeah. And I actually had another experience with that book. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Storyworthy by Matthew Dix.
I do know of that book. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a champion moth storyteller, and he's writing about stories and then referring to his stories, and then you can go watch him deliver them. And
cool.
It's really fun and interactive. I wish I had something that I could do in that
link to
regard.
I think the Art of Explanation was one of the first books that had QR codes on the pages that you can scan.
That's cool. Can I ask you about, so one of the things that I specifically call out in my book is this concept of the Monitorium, which you write about. And maybe let me just ask you what it is so you can explain it for the listeners. But I want to then tell you kind of why I like it so much and why it helped me in my own book. But anyway, how do you describe a Monitorium?
I appreciate that. I heard it from one of my friends named Ryan Turner. And it was something that he and his wife were doing. And he explained it as a moratorium on spending money. So it's not like a long-term lockdown. It's sort of like you have a goal in your life and it's going to cost money to do. So you go into a phase of living that is more about saving money. And that means living within constraints. So you do things like, there's the thing that you hear a lot about now, like nobody's going to retire by not buying that latte, right? Like it's small things, but it's not only the constraints of like eating out less, having a budget, doing things that don't cost money versus things that do. It's almost like a lifestyle and philosophy behind it of, this is a game we can play together. Like we can actually set targets for our spending and try to come in under that. And it's something that as a couple you can do together and celebrate those as wins, even though you're essentially sort of minimizing some of your lifestyle. And the key is that it's for a purpose, like it's for an outcome. Like, yes, we're saving now, but when we finally can pull the trigger on this new thing, we'll appreciate this time. Over time, it kind of, to me, like part of the background here is I grew up sort of, middle class, right? I didn't want for a lot. Some people would probably say I was a little bit spoiled. Sachi was not that. Her family wasn't a family of means at the time. And so she grew up with budgeting and sacrifice just ingrained in her brain, and I didn't. And so we had to find out a way to navigate that. And I think the Monitorium idea kind of came from her trying to show me how she was thinking about things. And over time, I realized that living the Monitorium wasn't as much of a sacrifice, but it was just a smarter way to live. Like, why wouldn't you always want to do that? And sure, you've got to have your fun. You've got to live your life, and you've got to sort of celebrate those things. But it taught me a lot about just a new perspective. I wouldn't say new, but a perspective that's more about joy and sacrifice rather than disappointment in it.
Yeah. And one thing that just came to mind was how by doing it, you may actually just uncover what you maybe don't need. So you'd like,
absolutely.
I mean, I hadn't even thought about that, but I love the perspective that you're talking about having joy from it. And because, I listen to so many podcasts, and so people are always talking about this stuff. But one of the things they talk about, like when you go on vacation, sometimes the vacation isn't as great as the anticipation of the vacation. And that's
Absolutely.
really what you're kind of producing here is you're like, I'm going to get this thing and we're going to
Yeah,
we're going to tighten our belts to get it. And how exciting is that?
absolutely. Yeah,
That's
I say
great.
that a lot, that happiness lives in anticipation. Like
Yes,
that's
that's
where happiness really comes from, I think. And I really believe that very strongly.
And the reason I included it in my book is because I tout values-based spending, right?
Mhm.
So, again, back to the latte. If you just love that latte, get it. But if it's not a big
Cheers.
deal, then don't and save $1,000.
Yeah.
But I think with values-based spending, comes or if that outfit makes you look awesome,
Mhm.
buy it, even if it's expensive. But then the counter argument, and I noticed this going through my early reader process is like, so you're basically telling me I can spend anything like,
Mhm.
but I'm like, well, not always. And there are times when you may need to pull back, but it's temporary. That
Mhm.
whole concept of temporary. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I just remembered I read about that.
Yeah, definitely. The guy, I can't remember his name. He wrote I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Sethi.
Ramiti,
Ramit
that's
Sethi.
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's said before, like, there's nothing wrong with buying luxurious things or if you have the money, spending that money on yourself, as long as it aligns with your values and your goals.
Yeah.
Like that, if that's something that makes you feel confident, if that makes you feel happy, if that makes you accomplish your goals, then there's nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like saving just to save.
Yeah. One of the other things I've read, I forget where it was. I think that you say something to the effect of, I've kind of designed my life around quality,
Mm.
maybe something to that. And I'm probably butchering it. What do you mean by that? I think I love it. I love it. But what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it's the contrast of quality versus quantity. It's like not necessarily how much you have, but
Hmm.
the quality of the things that you do have. And I think, having worked from home since 2003, that means I spend vast amount of my time at home. I've really tried to make it the place that I want it to be. And to me, it's like the quality of home, like versus I don't need the big house with 8 bedrooms. Like I don't need, a mansion or anything like that. I don't need a house that I can show off
Yeah.
to other rich people or something like that. It's not like that. Like I would rather spend my time finding the perfect plants for my office or something like that.
You haven't had the billionaires over yet for
Yeah,
dinner?
no, like, not that I know of. You never know.
Well, I've been on your email list for some time, and I'm curious about the thing you built on your wall in your home. Like that's craftsmanship, right? Like you don't
Man,
just
that was one of my favorite
whip that.
projects.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because I was trying to describe it to Kirby, or no, maybe it was my wife I was talking about it with, and she couldn't understand
It's
it.
really hard. It's really hard. It's really hard to explain. It really requires a visual. But basically, we have a
It
bit.
requires an explainer video. It sounds like.
Yeah, I know. Well, when we moved into a house in 2021, and we realized that one of the walls of the house around the solstice, the sun would cast a shadow across the wall, and that shadow would move as the sun went down. The shadow would move across the wall, and so we decided to put like pins on the wall for every 15 minutes of that line moving, so we could figure out like the movement of that line. And that was the start of trying to think of an art project for that wall. Like, what could we build and put on the wall that would sort of match the path of that shadow on the solstice? And so that ended up being this long project of trying to figure out how to do that. And I loved it. If people hired me to do that, I would do it tomorrow. But it took a lot of problem solving. It took a lot of time,
Yeah.
a lot of experimentation. But it's one of the most satisfying things I've done. I feel
now-
very proud of it still.
That's great. Kirby, was it you that I was trying to describe that to?
We talked about it for sure.
Because now I realize why I was confusing you, because now I know it's about the solstice, because I think I was describing it as like a clock. But then I was like, but wait, the sun is always moving in the sky. So how is that going to?
I say
He's going to be late all the time.
Yeah, I say it's like a clock that's only right once a year.
Yeah, that's cool. That's all right.
Yeah, that was one of our questions was like, well, what about with the time change?
Yeah, well,
But now it makes more sense.
Part of the thing too is living in the Pacific Northwest, it's mostly cloudy all the time, so it doesn't really matter.
It's true.
You better hope that on the solstice.
Yeah, the solstice is usually pretty reliable. It's more reliable than other times.
That's so great. What is there a question that I probably should have asked you that I didn't? And if not, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like,
There's a couple here, like, the difficulties in making videos and things like that. So
yeah.
one of the things that we changed was early on, we got started, as I mentioned, using paper cutouts on the whiteboard. And the
So
problem
cool.
with that, besides not having any video background, figuring that all out was once you have pieces of paper on the whiteboard and you're filming a scene, then the slightest tap of the camera or the slightest tap of the whiteboard means you have to start the whole thing over. And then once you've made a video in this very unique situation of lights and maybe there's windows with natural light, if you need to fix something, it's impossible to get that exact same like light profile on the whiteboard. And so every video when we were making it with paper cutouts was really stressful. Like it took, and there's big lights on you. It's hot and you're doing stop motion, moving little pieces of paper on the whiteboard. And eventually it just got to be, we just can't keep doing this. Like this takes too much time. We were personally cutting out hundreds of little pieces of paper for each videos. And eventually I was like, we got to move to digital. And I think we lost some of the magic, that's not quite as charming. It doesn't have that feel of just two people in their basement. But I always felt like that, the format is not our specialty. That is just a format. Like the specialty is in the writing. Like we really feel like for our videos that the visuals support the writing, that it's the writing is where the explanation lives. And so it shouldn't matter if it's digital or not. And now that it's been a few years, that's just what we do. It's all digital.
I feel like you're early on the trend of what they say in social media now, where it's like, it's not how perfect the video looks. It's like people just want an authentic person and an authentic story.
You mentioned the idea of like community and membership and things like that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, being sort of a solo entrepreneur kind of thing. I should say too, my wife Sachi was with me. She joined Common Craft in 2007. She was a huge part of Common Craft. She was sort of like, she has an MBA. She could be like an executive at a big company, but she said, I'm done with computers. I'm not doing this. And for a year and a half became a professional baker. So she was making croissants every day at a local French bakery here. And so that when I say solo entrepreneur, that's why it's just me now. But, something we haven't talked about is sort of the elephant in the room of AI and how AI is going to change things. And I feel like that people are going to be even more tuned to authentic personalities online, authentic people who are obviously doing it themselves and not mediated by some AI. And so I feel like going forward that for people like us who are trying to engage people, that the more that we can be authentic online and show our real faces and talk about things that are happening in our lives and try to create that human connection, that's going to be even more powerful going forward. That I like to think that people are going to thirst for that. Like I'm done with the AI slop. I really just want to talk to humans.
Boy, I hope so too. I think it will. I mean, if everyone's hoping it will, then it hopefully will because of that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your new project? I did notice that like you have kind of a relatively new Substack, right?
Yeah, it's gone through a couple of transitions, but I started really thinking a lot about human nature. I've always been fascinated with human nature. I think that's part of the communication thing is like, I really love thinking like, how is this going to work in someone else's head? But just in the last, 6 months or so, I saw this opportunity that, I wrote The Art of Explanation in 2012. And that was sort of a look at like our perspective on explanation. Like, here's how you think about packaging an idea into a form that's going to work for your audience. And the whole perspective was like from the perspective of the explainer, the person who is crafting the explanation and thinking about empathy and empathizing with your audience and all that stuff. And there's art to that. Like that's not, some of that is more science, but I thought like maybe now's the time for the science of communication. I'm sorry, the science of explanation versus the art of explanation. And that's what this new project is diving into the sort of basics of cognitive science, like how an idea kind of becomes a memory that you can use in the future. And once you learn about that, you see that there are a very specific set of cognitive things that an idea has to overcome in order to be remembered. And that's what I'm focusing on right now in this series called The Gauntlet, is like thinking about like, why do some ideas survive and some die? And if you can understand that, You understand that we have, like, how our mind works is predictable. That's part of the science of it is like, we know how the mind actually works in this way. And if we know these things, then that should be gold for thinking about explanations. Like, I should be able to engineer an explanation that fits with these processes. And so I'm at the very beginning of this idea. I'm learning as much as I'm teaching, but I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by thinking about what the brain is actually doing.
That's cool. And I think I read the one where, you can't remember a string of numbers, but people used to be able to remember phone numbers because you'd group them in an area code, then the city digits,
chunk
and then
them.
the
Yeah.
yeah, chunk 'em.
Yeah,
Oh, well, that's great.
It's one example of many. But going forward, I feel like the science of explanation is something, this idea, maybe not just this subject, but this idea is my thing going forward. It's sort of, I'm orienting a lot of Common Craft around this idea because it seems like such a great match for what I've done in the past.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. Where I also thought you were going to take that, which is not just the art, but the science, but like you were writing it from the perspective of the explainer. How about the perspective of the explainee? And also, again, with the AI stuff, like we were just talking about, which is like, what are they expecting now? The explainee.
Yeah,
That's
totally. There is something to that. And I like, sort of like the social part of it. I think that when people are thinking a lot about how AI is working, I think they're also going to be thinking about, well, how does the brain work? The human nature side of that is going to be more interesting to people. And the reality is that the science of cognitive science really comes from computational models where people build these programs that match what's happening in the mind, and it sort of makes the mental processes visual, and so you can test it and stuff. So there's AI and cognitive science actually work together pretty closely in that way.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, this has been a true pleasure. I'm so glad that we've had a chance to talk. Where can our listeners find you and learn more about you?
Yeah. Commoncraft.com is where our videos are. My website, LeeLeFever.com, is sort of a clearinghouse of all the things I'm doing. You'll see links right on the front page. Scienceofexplanation.com is where I'm writing currently. So those are probably the best options.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lee, so much for coming on.
Thank you, Brian. It's been great.
All right, Kirby, what a great conversation that was with Lee. What did you take away from it?
Yeah, he was very insightful. I feel like around one thing that he said was that to increase the holder value of his like solopreneur business. And that doesn't always mean maximizing money. And how do you maximize time and money together? And I think obviously that goes right back to like a lifestyle business. How do we value the things that we have in our lives and just really how they've maximized where they're at now?
I agree. The fact that he and his wife are the shareholders of their business and they're going to maximize the value how they want. I thought that was great. Also, how he's just very intentional about organizing his life to be one that's of high quality and how he wants to do it, which may not be how everybody wants to do it. And he's good with that too, which I think is pretty cool. And then the other thing I just wanted to tie back to the book is, again, he's probably the closest I've seen to, just purely employing these ideas of the catalyst. So I didn't realize he had really two that he did, which was, the exponentially valuable relationship and how he created that Twitter video and then reached out to them and they put it on their website and drove all this business to them. But then, of course, obviously the exponentially valuable idea, which this idea of explanation he's done so many different things around it, but everything is related to it. I thought that was very interesting.
And I thought it was also interesting when he was talking about that. He said a lot of the shifts that he made was from people asking, just simply asking. I was like, oh, way to monetize on a solution
which totally ties back to chapter 10, I believe, 10 or 11 in my book, which talks about how to create something that people want, provide it in a differentiated way, and then don't be too proud to take recommendations from your customers and adapt your business to meet it. And that's exactly what he did successfully.
Yes.
All right. So thanks so much for joining us again on the Time Freedom Podcast. Please give us an honest review where you do and like and subscribe on YouTube. And we'll see you next week. Hey, listeners of the podcast, I have a special deal for you. You can now pre-order my book, Time Freedom, if you go to the link timefreedombook.com. And my special is normally if you order 3 books, you can get the audiobook free immediately. If you put the promo code podcast, you can order 1 book at your favorite retailer, Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, wherever, and put your order number in the form, put the promo code podcast, and I'll immediately send you the audiobook for free right away. So you don't have to wait. Pre-order the hard copy book, get the audiobook free. Thank you so much for your support. TimeFreedomBook.com.